So I know some of you who are watching this have never seen an escort, and maybe you're just watching this out of curiosity or for entertainment purposes, and you're thinking, who the f is stupid enough to fall in love with a sex worker? Well, a lot of men, because they're not made of stone. Meditation and journaling is what led me out of this low point in my life. And it also led me to a place where I felt like I was getting closer to God. And I know that's not something that I talk about on this channel. I don't think I ever have. But once I started to get real about my feelings, I started to be more comfortable having faith in God again. Because when I started my sex worker journey, I turned away from God. Hello, and welcome to Sex, Love, and Soul. I'm Mary Knight, and I'm so glad that you're here. I think by now it's pretty obvious that I didn't create this channel so that I could be judgmental and tell you that you're bad and wrong for wanting the things that you want. And I'm certainly not telling you that you're bad and wrong for seeing escorts. You are grown-ass men. You get to do what you want. And I believe that seeing escorts is a solution to a problem. And men who see escorts are simply using the tools they have to solve that problem. But to be clear, I'm not a pom-pom girl for prostitution. Anybody who's coached with me knows that if they ask me if they think they should start seeing escorts, especially when they've never seen an escort before, I always caution them and I tell them that no, I don't think they should start seeing escorts. And they're always surprised. They ask me why. And I say, because if you're looking for a relationship built on emotion and connection, that's not what seeing an escort is about. And don't count on it turning into that. And I talked all about that in my last video about the realities of dating an escort. Seeing an escort is having a superficial, light-hearted relationship to have some of your needs met. That's it. And if you're hurting and you're lonely, then you're vulnerable, whether you realize it or not. And you're going to feel connected to this woman because she's paying attention to you, making you feel desired, and there's sex involved. But 99.9% of the time, if you weren't paying her, she wouldn't give you the time of day. Because getting together with you is her job. It's work. It's a transaction. That doesn't mean that she doesn't like you as a person or that she's not having some fun with you. It means that she's not falling in love with you. This is a fantasy. A lot of men who see escorts don't understand that escorts and sex workers of all kinds are amazing actresses. And you're seeing and interacting with a persona. Back when I was escorting, I used a different name. Mary is my real name, but I had a name that I used. Everyone does. And part of it is for privacy and for safety. And part of it is this kind of protection. You know, you're playing a role and it allows you to be open with men in a way that if I had just been Mary, that wouldn't have worked because Mary was not into those men. The real me wasn't attracted to my clients, but my persona was. I could have fun, I could feel free sexually and think these men were charming and sexy and fabulously entertaining company, and I could feel good about what I was doing. But as soon as they left and I shut the door behind them and I took a bath and got ready for my next appointment, right? Or maybe I went to lunch or whatever I was doing, I was no longer thinking about them unless we had had some super fun time or we did something that was exceptionally cool or they had pissed me off, right? It had to be something extraordinary for them to still be on my mind. And the point of my talking about all of this is I want to give you some perspective. I want to give you an opportunity to start thinking about some different tools to solve some of life's problems. So maybe you could start doing some things where you actually feel good about yourself and the decisions that you're making. And they can be more in alignment with what you think of as your values. And you can live life more out in the open. Because if you're married and you're seeing an escort, chances are your wife has no idea. And if she does, she hasn't let you know. But chances are, if y'all have had a conversation where she said that she shut down because she doesn't feel close to you, or maybe she's had an illness or a really rough menopause or whatever is going on between y'all, and she says, honey, I'm not feeling it. I know you have needs and desires, so please go ahead and take care of that. I don't want to know about it. All I ask is that you're careful, that you don't embarrass me, don't let anyone find out. That does happen. And I have actually, as weird as it sounds, I've had a couple of clients where that was the case. And I know that it was the case because I talked to their wives. How about that? That's wild. And it was kind of uncomfortable for me. But mostly it's men sneaking around doing something they know that if their wife found out, it would jeopardize their marriage and their career and their relationships with their families and their lives and their futures. But men who are doing that don't necessarily feel great about it. They don't like that they have to lie, and it can be a strain on them and put more strain on their marriage, even though the benefits they feel like they're getting from seeing escorts is worth all of that risk and all the melodrama that's going on inside their heads. And then for some of them, the sneaking around actually becomes part of the excitement. Men say they feel alive for the first time in a long time once they start seeing sex workers. Because if you're in a marriage where you're not having sex and you and your wife don't have a heart connection, in many ways, you're dumbing down your masculine essence so that you can fit into this marriage. I don't think that's possible for you to be in your full masculine power while living in a sexless marriage, unless it's a mutually agreed upon situation. But if you're a single guy and you can afford it, don't start seeing sex workers, because once you start, it's extremely difficult to stop because it's so easy. There's not a lot of give and take in these relationships. And I've gotten emails from men telling me that they've seen a few or even several escorts, and the escorts always tell me that I'm such a great client and that they would like to see me again. But yet, when I go out on dates with women out in the real world, I can never get a second date. Well, because when you're on a date with an escort, you don't have to bring any razzle dazzle, right? You get to be boring when you're a client because you're paying. That's how that works. The money balances it out. My standards for clients were minimal. He had to pass my screening. He had to be fun to correspond with during the screening process. He had to be willing to observe all of my rules of etiquette that were posted on my website. He had to pay me as agreed. And if he was able to do that, I would see him. My little personal preference was I wouldn't see men who looked really old or who were really old because it wasn't a turn on to me. Okay, that's just one of my things. But other than that, I was like, hey, yeah, let's get it on. And so during our session, I'm giving them my undivided attention. I'm listening. I'm learning about them. I love talking to people and hearing their stories and learning about their life situations. I love hearing people talk about themselves. I always have. And it worked out for me as an escort because who doesn't want to talk about themselves? So I'm listening, I'm laughing, talking. And then after this fun evening of relating, just enjoying this light, fun time, we go back to his hotel room and we have sex. All he had to do was show up, smell nice, be a decent human being, and pay me, and I would do my best to give him the time of his life. So you could see that could be something really easy to fall into, to get used to. And the clients I saw once a week, like 4 and 5 hours at a time, naturally it felt to them like we had this budding relationship, like we were dating. And I get that. But for me, it didn't feel that way because they weren't the only men I saw. There wasn't a heart connection between us. Our connection was all intellectual. It was the sharing of ideas, sharing thoughts, philosophizing, telling stories, and also a physical connection. And as I talked about in my last video, to an escort, client does not automatically equal love interest. And I think something that needs to be acknowledged, deeply acknowledged, is men who see escorts are grieving. They're grieving the loss of their relationship with their wives. All that stuff that they're doing with an escort, they want to be doing with their wives. Men are hurting. They're wounded. And as an escort, when you have a man come to you who is so wounded and he's grieving and he's wanting and needing your attention, what does this wounded married man really have to offer an escort besides money? I'm not saying I wasn't wounded at that time. I was, but I was aware of my wounding and I was actively working on healing it. I was creating a scar so I didn't have this oozing open sore like a lot of men that I saw did. That sounds gross. That was a gross image. But they didn't realize that they were wounded and that I could see it. They thought they were hiding it. But that was my job as an escort, reading people, honing in on their needs and their wants and their desires, and being able to assess that so that I could be who they needed me to be in those moments. And I was always very good at reading people. A lot of escorts are, right? That's the biggest part of your job, is reading people and being a good listener. And that's what makes escorts very successful. So for me, this reading people thing, I grew up with a mentally ill mom, and that's how I was so good at it. It wasn't because I was just so clever. Not that I don't think I'm clever, but I was observant because I always had to be on high alert in my childhood. So I always had to be prepared for who knows what might be coming my way. And so doing this assessment, it allowed me to put on a good show. Right? Sex workers do so much evaluating of you before they would even meet you in person. So they already have an idea formed of who you are to them. And for you to be able to change that perception, to have her think of you as a man and not as a client, is not an easy feat. You don't even know that you've been prejudged. But again, it didn't mean that I didn't care about the men, that I didn't like them as people or as fellow human beings, or that I didn't have compassion for them, or I didn't want them around. It wasn't like that. But having those feelings about a man does not translate into hot romance. Sometimes what happens is escorts will continue to see clients because she feels sorry for them. And I remember that was the case with me. I would see clients that I thought of as pathetic, not in a hateful way, but in a sad way, because some men thought that I really loved them, even though I had never said that or given them any indication of that. I felt like a monster because they thought that what we had was love, because they were used to getting so little. So little, and I was sad for them. And I remember having a talk with one client who had gotten so clingy with me, and I saw him once a month, and he lived in Austin, and he was a fetish client. So we had never had sex, and the stuff that he wanted me to do, at first, I was willing to do it because I thought it was interesting. It was a curiosity to me, and of course, I'm pretty adventurous. So I was like, sure, that sounds cool. I was into it once or twice, and then I told him, look, I don't like doing this. It's just not for me. And then he would beg me to see him, and so I would capitulate, and I would see him again. And finally, one day, I just had enough, and I told him, I cannot see you anymore. And I remember he called me back. I was in a coffee shop, and I'm having this conversation with him in hushed tones up against the wall. And he said, you don't know how much you mean to me. I'm not in love with you. I'm not trying to be weird with you, but I don't have anybody in my life that I can truly be myself with but you. Please keep seeing me. I won't ask you to do anything weird. And he said, just from now on, we can meet for lunch or happy hour and do our appointment out in the open, out in public. And I said, okay, because how could I say no? Someone tells you that you are the only person they can truly be themselves with. There was some manipulation going on his part there. I know, I fell for it, but I did it. So I know some of you who are watching this have never seen an escort, and maybe you're just watching this out of curiosity or for entertainment purposes, and you're thinking, who the is stupid enough to fall in love with a sex worker? Well, a lot of men, because they're not made of stone. Being a sex worker off and on for 15 years, in various capacities, because I've done all kinds of things. And I was a madam for a good chunk of that time where I wasn't seeing any clients. But when I was seeing clients, what would happen for me is seeing people that I knew had all these feelings for me, because that happens with sex workers of all kinds. It especially happens with dominatrices and strippers and OnlyFans girls. And I think it's because they don't have sex with any of these guys. And so it remains a fantasy, but they can really build up in a man's mind. So I started to feel really compromised by what I was doing, but I wasn't in a financial position to quit. So I just kept doing this job and feeling like I was just sinking lower and lower and lower. And men were kind of picking up on this vulnerability as something they could relate to. And I think they were mistaking it for something to do with them, as if there was some kind of real intimacy between us, when really it was just my feeling bad about myself. And I think that they could relate to that in me. And during this time, I had more and more men telling me that they loved me, trying to date me, wanting me to meet their kids. As I mentioned in another video, I had 3 different clients ask me to marry them. That's really interesting to me. Yeah, because the energy that I was putting out was one of kind of vulnerability and neediness. And they were really picking up on that. Birds of a feather flock together. Yeah, and at a certain point, I was feeling like I was just going through the motions. But the men never seemed to notice. Again, they were just used to getting so little in their lives that they thought that these measly scraps that I was throwing out to them were actually meaningful. And being around people like that day in, day out, it's hard. And I felt like I was really becoming just like them, just demanding so little of my life and of myself. And I thought, why am I doing this? And once I was willing to listen to the answers I got when I asked that question, it helped me to gather up more self-esteem. And I started to go to book writing seminars and conferences and meeting all of these aspiring authors, people who were successful doing what they loved. And it was really inspiring to me. And I started going to these spiritual retreats and these 10-day silent meditation Vipassana courses. And I mean, I've done several of those, but meditation and journaling is what led me out of this low point in my life. And it also led me to a place where I felt like I was getting closer to God. And I know that's not something that I talk about on this channel. I don't think I ever have. But once I started to get real about my feelings, I started to be more comfortable having faith in God again. Because when I started my sex worker journey, I turned away from God, away from having faith, because I thought what I was doing was not in alignment with something that a God would want for me. And so instead of changing my life and getting in alignment with my values and what I knew to be true, I turned away from God. And I remember consciously thinking, okay, I'm going to put my faith in God and all of that stuff over here in this corner, and I'm going to go on with my life and go on this little journey, and then I can pick all this back up when I'm done. I would pick up my faith and just put it right back on, because I really felt like what I was doing was just way out of alignment with something that a God would want me to do. And I wrote about that in my memoir. I have a memoir that I'm writing that's coming out, fingers crossed, the end of this year. And in it, I talk about how escorting and sex work led me back to God, but led me back to myself. All right, so to wrap all of this up, my thoughts are this. For many men, seeing escorts is a way to bring energy back into their lives, and they're enriched by this experience, and they're able to bring that energy into their marriage, into everything they're doing, because they have this sense of relief. And so you found that it really is a great solution to your problem, but it's not a lasting solution. It's temporary. It's like alcohol, right? Alcohol is a great solution for social anxiety, for letting go of inhibitions, all that kind of stuff. But the consequences over time for using alcohol are terrible. And so seeing an escort might be a fantastic solution for you, but it's not sustainable. And you're going to want to get to a point where you can level up. So you're going to change your level of consciousness. You're going to become a different man. And so you're going to see that there actually are other tools out there. And that you will begin to understand that you can find what you're looking for outside of yourself, within yourself, right? You'll be finding answers and validation on your own within you, and in ways that feel really good to you and are in alignment with who you want to be as a man. The vision that you have for yourself, I know for many of you, is not seeing sex workers. Again, I'm not condemning, I'm not judging. I know for many of you, you want so much more, and you can have it. You can have it, and I can show you how. I'm available for private one-on-one coaching sessions where we can talk about anything you want to talk about. No topic is off limits. So far, anyway. We can put together a plan, help you create this vision for your future where you can actually have some solid, concrete steps to take to give you some different ways to think about things, to come to some different understandings, some higher level actions and thoughts. And you can find out about coaching with me on sexloveandsoulcoaching.com or sexloveandsoul.com. I also have a book, How to Turn Nice into a Sexy Superpower, How to Go from Dumped to Desired. And it is $8 right now, available for sale on the same website, sexloveandsoul.com, or there's a link to both of these things in my show notes and in my About Me on YouTube. Let's see, what else do I want to say? Hey, if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, now is the time. Subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I love that you're here. I appreciate your time, and bye for now.